Alrighty, so welcome to our Zoom on raising a concern or making a complaint after birth. So I am your host or presenter, Lorna Phillip, founder of Black Mama's Birth Village. So let's go through how to make a complaint or how to raise a concern after you've had your baby. So in this presentation, we're going to cover taking care of you, exploring your feelings now after your birth, the steps that you may want to take to either raise the concern or make the formal complaint. Talk about whether you actually want to make a complaint or a concern, what are the differences, where you can get help from, because I can't condense it all into one very short webinar, but where you can get help from after you've been through the steps. And just to remind you that what we will talk about today, I am not giving legal advice. I am not a lawyer. I am not a solicitor. I'm not a barrister. I'm a doula. So this is information that I'm actually giving you and sharing with you from a book called AIMS Resolution After Birth. And I'll show you that book at the very end of this webinar. So this is not legal advice. If you are thinking about going down the legal route, then I'd advise you to seek good legal advice. Okay, that's what we're covering. Okay, so first of all, before we launch into the kind of meaty bit of the webinar, it's really important that when we revisit our birth story, when we think about making a complaint or raising a concern, that we take really good care of ourselves, that we are extra gentle with ourselves. Because if your birth has been traumatic, then talking about trauma can be traumatic in itself. So make sure that when you start this process, that you are being held and looked after by your loved ones, that you take frequent breaks when it all gets too much for you, or if it gets too much for you. If you find yourself becoming tearful as you go over your own birth story, then be really super, super gentle with yourself. This is not a marathon, it's not a sprint here. Take time and look after yourself. So maybe think about, for example, arranging something quite nice for yourself after you start writing down your birth experiences, okay? Or doing it with somebody else, especially if that somebody else was present at your birth. Think about sharing that with somebody that you trust. Okay, proceed with caution. Okay, so first of all, what I recommend that you do when you are thinking about raising a concern or writing a complaint is think about how you feel about your birth experience now. Here are just a few examples of the words that you might relate to. So are you feeling angry, shocked, disappointed, surprised, robbed? I mean, robbed of a birth experience that's a good one, confused, regretful, thankful, invisible, helpless, violated, upset, shamed, tearful, disconnected, calm, lost, frustrated, ignored, disempowered, not listened to, betrayed, happy, guilty, peaceful, lied to, broken, exhausted, numb, content, hurt, scared, shocked, overwhelmed, less than. Quite emotive words, in fact, very emotive words. And it's not an exhaustive list. There's many, many other words that you can think of when thinking about your own birth experience. So one of the first steps is start to think about, when you think about your overall birth experience from start to finish, what are the words that you come up with? What are the emotion type words that you come up with? Okay, write a list of them down on a piece of paper, in a notebook is even better. And just highlight the areas which upset you the most. Maybe think about noting down the timings of the things that happened that made you feel that way. For example, if you were birthing in hospital and you'd been there for a while and you were in a lot of discomfort or pain, you pressed your buzzer, midwife came and you said, I'm in lots of pain, can I have some pain relief? And if they said to you something like, oh, it's not time yet for you to have pain relief, maybe you felt like you weren't listened to. Maybe you felt invisible, helpless. Okay, note that down, highlight those words, and kind of think about the rough timings. It doesn't have to be to the letter or to the time, to the minute, but think about, maybe an hour or 2 or 3 hours into your time at hospital. This is what happened. Note down the people that were present when you felt that way. So note down if your partner was with you or your birth partner was with you, your doula. Note down the staff that you interacted with at that time, either the name, if you know the name, or a description, or, their role. Was it a midwife? Was it a doctor? Was it a member of the ward cleaning staff, the housekeeping staff? Who was it that you were interacting with when you felt that emotion? When you've done that, when you've noted down those feelings and noted down the approximate timings and who was with you, this is the time to undertake the massive task of writing everything down. And I mean everything. And this is the bit that's going to take the time and may bring up some feelings again that you felt at the time of your labor and birth. So take your time, take it slowly, but I want you to write down everything, whether it's in bullet points, paragraphs, phrases, notes. Use that notebook. Just use the one notebook for all of this stuff. Write down everything from the very start until the end. Whether your start is actually your antenatal appointments. So for some people, they want to raise a concern or make a complaint about their antenatal care. Start then. Okay, but start at where you think it kind of went wrong, where you feel like you weren't treated right. Start there and go all the way through to the end, taking breaks as necessary, even a few days break. Put it down, close the notebook, go about your daily business, and come back to it when you feel able to pick it up again. Okay, note everything down. Okay. Once you've written down your story, your experience, everything, it's time now to put it into some kind of order. You can't present this to your local hospital trust or to pals in the state that it's in now, this kind of, the notes and the bullet points. It needs to be put into some kind of order. Here are some questions that you may want to ask yourself to help you to put those notes or bullet points into some kind of, reasonable order. How were you treated? How were you not listened to? How were your birth preferences or birth plan? How was that received and supported? Did they look at it? Did they read it when you gave them the birth plan? If you had a birth plan, did they read it? Or was it just discarded and just put into the back of your notes? How was your consent sought? So, for example, examinations. I always say it's really important that they gain your explicit consent to examine your vagina and examine your cervix. So if it was a case of, right, lie down, knickers off, knees open, that's not gaining your consent. So for any examination, any intervention, how was your consent sought? How did you agree or maybe not agree to what they did or what happened to you? How was your environment? Did you have privacy? Was it noisy? Was your dignity respected? For example, were people coming in and out of your birth room? If you're birthing in hospital, were they in and out of your birth room? Maybe not even knocking, or knocking once and not even waiting for a come in? Or who is it? Was it a knock and then all of a sudden somebody's there in your room? That's not private. That's not respecting your dignity. So, how did that go for you? How did your treatment affect your birth experience? Going back to that feeling of being robbed, did you feel like you were robbed of a positive birth experience or not? How did your treatment affect your birth experience? How were you spoken to and what was said? Chances are, even if your birth was 7, 8, 9 months ago, you'll still remember how you were spoken to and what was said to you. You may have replayed that in your mind, lots of times. So I doubt that you've forgotten. So how were you spoken to and what was said? Who was involved in that interaction? Who was involved? Again, was it a midwife? Was it a doctor, a consultant? Was it a member of the housekeeping staff? Was it a porter? Who was it? Who was it that was involved in that interaction with you? And was it just one, when I say just, but was it one incident or was it many? Did you feel that you weren't listened to lots of times during your time there? Or was it a one-off? And were there any aspects of your care that you thought that you thought were good? That's important to acknowledge too. If you thought that certain aspects of your care or certain staff members treated you very well, who was that? And what did they do? So once you've asked yourself those questions and you've noted down your responses in that notebook, we can move on. Okay. Now you may want to put your concern or your complaint under some headings just to clarify exactly what it is. What is the aspect of your care that wasn't good and you want to raise a concern about or you want to complain about? Was it about how you were treated in the antenatal phase? Was it something about your appointments that you want to raise a concern about? Was it about the consent? Again, going back to that consent question, that you weren't, they didn't really seek your consent fully for interventions? Did things happen to you rather than them gaining your consent and saying, right, shall we? What do you think about it? Working together with this. Were things done to you that you didn't consent to? Where you labored and gave birth, are you unhappy about where you labored, where you kind of spent those hours, whilst your body was preparing to labor? And were you unhappy about where you gave birth? Did they keep you waiting a long time in the waiting room and you almost gave birth in the waiting room? Was there some palaver in the car park? You almost gave birth in the car? Was there some issue about letting your birth partner in, maybe COVID times, that made you give birth without the support of your partner or birth partner? Was there any discrimination? You know for yourself as Black mamas how that feels. So don't second guess yourself. If you feel that there's been some discrimination, then that needs to go down in this concern or complaint. Do you think there were any medical complications or even medical negligence that took place during your labor and birth? Again, you'll know that for yourself, and that should be noted down. Or is there anything else that you can put, a heading that you can put your notes under? Okay, so can you see what we're doing is we're writing the whole story down, and now we're starting to kind of make sense of it, give it some structure, so that the person who's reading it on the other side can really kind of go through point by point and really make sense of your story and what you are conveying in it. Okay, and that's what needs to happen. It can't just be the raw story by itself. Okay, so at this stage, you may want to start thinking, am I raising a concern or am I making a formal complaint? And so you may want to ask these questions of yourself so you can decide what the outcome of this complaint or concern is. And this is going to help you decide actually it's a complaint or no, it's a concern. Questions are, would you like them to acknowledge what happened to you? So if you raise a concern, for example, is it just you want them to say, okay, we get it and we'll look into it? Are you looking for an apology? Are you looking for an explanation of what happened to you? You know, why was I left for hours without being seen to? What went on that evening or that morning that I was there in labour? Are you looking to change the policy in the hospital? So it could be a policy around birth partners, for example. When can a birth partner join you in labour? It may be a policy around examinations. Are you thinking, if this is a policy of the hospital, then it needs to change, and I'd like to be a part of that change? Are you wanting staff to understand how their actions affected you? Kind of raising awareness, really, almost like a training issue. Yeah, you think the staff need to know how what they said to you or how they treated you, how it affected your birth experience. Are you wanting compensation for what happened? Are you wanting to alert the local authorities about dangerous practices? Do you think what happened to you when you were in labour, do you think it was dangerous practice? And are you wanting to alert the local authorities to that dangerous practice? Or is it something else? So you can see there's quite a lot of questions to ask yourself. Okay. Again, complaint or concern about a member of staff. Some more questions to consider. So if you are making a complaint about a specific staff member or raising a concern about them, did they listen to you or respect you? Do you think that there was an intention to cause you harm? Did the member of staff discriminate against you? Do you know somebody else who's been in a similar situation but were treated differently or you were treated differently? So for example, again, in the case of pain relief, you know, maybe, for example, I don't know, they examined you and you were 3 centimeters dilated and they denied you strong pain relief. You maybe wanted gas and air at that stage, but you know that somebody else on that ward that day was at 3 centimeters and they gave them gas and air. That's a very kind of loose example, but that's the kind of thing. Do you know somebody who was in the same position as you but got different treatment to you? Or something else? Write down your responses to these questions, again in your notebook, because they're going to help you guide your next steps. So let's talk about the difference between a complaint and a concern. So a complaint is a more formal procedure which can take a lot of time and a lot of energy. I want to be really open and honest with you here. It can take a lot of time. So when you raise a formal complaint, they have a time scale to respond to each part of that complaint procedure. Sometimes what happens, and this is my own first-hand experience, is that time scale can be pushed back and pushed back. You'll get a letter maybe saying, you know, we acknowledge that your letter of complaint. Yes, we have 28 days, for example, to respond to you. Unfortunately, so-and-so is off sick right now. They are part of the investigation. And so we're not able to proceed until that person is back at work. So it's going to be a long, drawn-out procedure. It can happen, and I want you to be aware of that, not to put you off, but to be aware that it can take a lot of time and it can be quite wearing, okay? One of the first things you'll need to do if you are making a formal complaint is to get hold of your health records, okay? And I'll give you more information on how you can do that. If you are raising a concern, however, then feeding back to maybe the director of midwifery or PALS or another somebody in the system, feeding back what went wrong to stop it from happening again to somebody else. You may or may not receive a response to that raising of the concern. Sometimes you'll get like a standard letter saying, you know, thank you, Mrs. So-and-so. We've received your letter or your email or your telephone call, and yeah, we'll be looking into it. But you may not hear anything more after raising a concern. If you do, fantastic. But it's not always the case that you receive a letter or a formal something at the end. Okay, just to be aware of that. Okay. So if you are making a complaint, generally, and remember, I am not a legal person, so, you know, look into this yourself and I'll show you where. But generally, you have 12 months to make the complaint, okay? 12 months from the time of the treatment. But you know what? If it's over 12 months and you really want to make that complaint, I will still go ahead and make that complaint. As well as getting hold of your health records, get a hold of the hospital's complaints procedure so that you're following it to the letter. You don't want them sending you stuff back saying, oh no, it's too soon. We do that at point 25. Yeah. Get the procedure, follow it to the letter. Okay. All the information that you need about making a complaint can be found here. You don't need to note this down now. I am going to make this video available to you afterwards, so you can re-watch it. But you need to go to birth rights and go to fact sheets and go to making a complaint. It lays it all out there for you. I could not possibly include all of that information in today's presentation. It's all there for you, okay, laid out really clearly. Okay, so come to the end now. Again, just want to reiterate that you must take care of you when going back over your birth story, your birth experience. Again, if it's been traumatic or just been a not very nice experience for you or your family or your baby, really important that when you're rethinking and re-going back over these things, that you take good care of yourself emotionally, physically, mentally. Okay, so if you can, if you have a trusted person, share the load with that trusted person. And better still, if that person was with you and witnessed the treatment that you received in the system. So please, please, please take really good care of yourself. Okay, just at the very end here, I've just noted some resources here that can help you if you are raising a concern or making a complaint. Most of this material today that I'm giving to you was taken from AIMS, and that's the Association for Improvements in Maternity Services. Their book is called Resolution After Birth, and it's fantastic. It's one that I recommend you get. It's around about £8, £8 to £10, I think. And that's their website there. Also, Birthright, another fantastic organization, has lots of fact sheets and again lays out how you can make your complaint or raise your concern. Another website is Human Rights in Childbirth, and there's the link for that. And again, I've got to write it down. I'll make this video available to you. Okay, thank you for listening. So today we talked about raising a concern or making a complaint, and it was with me, Lorna Phillip, founder of Black Mama's Birth Village. So I'm now going to press stop on the share and stop on the recording.